Hello, my name's Lindy Cowling. Welcome to the channel. My website is www.lindycowling.co.uk. Email info@lindycowling.co.uk. Title of the video today, which I wasn't expecting to record, is who are you beyond the label? Who are you beyond the label? So this is a follow-up really to the video I just did yesterday about August being a month of purification, of being able to really push forward into a state of awareness, a state of awakening, and a state of consciousness where things that we didn't know were holding us back in our own belief systems or our own programming are made aware to us. So this is a follow-up to it. And at the end of that video yesterday, I was saying this is food for another video, really, that people get to a stage where they're afraid of, as they awaken and uncover all of these other concepts about who they are and what life is about, they get very afraid of what is going to be left in terms of their belief systems and awareness if they are taken back to a state of just pure consciousness. So I will start at the top. Well, I was going to say I'll start at the top and work my way down, but I think I'm going to do it the other way around this time. I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. So as we go through our process of awakening, we have different stages that we go through. And as we are awakening up, as we go through those stepping stones, those stages, we become aware of entanglements, physical entanglements and quantum entanglements, energetic entanglements that we have had running, for millennia. So that is part of our awakening and part of our process. We come into the awareness that we're a multidimensional soul, which means we are existing as infinite expressions of soul consciousness in infinite timelines and in infinite parallel realities all at the same time. And I'm saying this very blasé. It's mind-blowing at the time when you go through all these states of awakening and awareness, but I'm just kind of like condensing it because I don't want this video to go on too long. But you go through these different stages where you not only entertain the idea as a concept, but you become the realization and actualization of it, which means it's no longer outside of you as an abstract concept. You kind of are it, and you no longer have the knowledge on something, you have the wisdom on it. So there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, and doing and being, for example. So as you go up through these different stages, or as we go up through these different stages, you gradually, or many people gradually, get to a stage where they become aware that many aspects of their lives, in fact most of their lives, has been spent in an unconscious, pre-programmed, governed state, governed by the families they're brought up into, or the culture, or the country, or the political system, or the society system, whatever. Their education, etc., etc. As people awaken, they begin to look at and begin to question many aspects of that, and they begin, as they are self-realized and self-actualized, to go into a process of what we'll call questioning those aspects and questioning that reality, and then ultimately they start to question who they are and who they are behind the label of the title they have, or behind the label of the job they do, or behind the label of the lifestyle that they lead or the life they lead, beyond the label of the family they're in, or the culture they're in, or the country they're in, or the sexuality they are, etc., etc., etc. It goes on and on and on. They begin to question. They go into a process of questioning or go into a process of inquiry. This process can take months, or it can take a few years. It doesn't go in, you don't go into that questioning inquiry for a day or two and then you've kind of gone past that bit. It's a little bit more involved than that, but it's different for everyone. They just go into a process of questioning and inquiry. As part of that questioning and inquiry, there is an emotional and mental component, energetically and physically, because as they have an awareness of these kind of things, then they start to look at themselves differently and question their lives and question the whole structures that they are within, and societies they're in and countries they're in. And of course that brings about some level of distress, actually, that awareness, because it can be very confusing and disorientating and kind of upsetting. It's a bit like that, again, that death rebirth thing, when you're not literally dying, but you're dying to everything you thought you were and being reborn again into who you truly are. So the caterpillar coming into the butterfly scenario again. And although I'm sounding blasé about it, it is a process, and there's nothing blasé about this. It's almost like when people are going through that so many things fall away from them and so many people fall away from them as they come into that awareness, because of course their inner reality changes, so their outer reality changes, the micro and the macro. So as these things come up for people, they can get very upset and they can cry, or they can get angry, or they can feel despairing, or they, thinking, what, I've lived my whole life a particular way and suddenly I realise actually that wasn't my choice, or that wasn't really me. I'm just keeping it simple here, simple example. So they go through different stages, a bit like grieving, until it doesn't affect them that way. Or others, actually, it's the opposite, and they suddenly feel a sense of freedom, of liberation, of euphoria, and it affects them that way. That's less usual when you're coming away from everything you thought you were and are, into the truth of who you are. It's not usually euphoria that stays as euphoria. You usually go through certain stages of a process here, because there is an element of letting go. Letting go sounds so easy. It is the hardest thing that we as human beings do. Letting go of a concept, letting go of an idea, a belief system, letting go of the identity of who we think we are, letting go of our perception. We get very entrenched in that. Letting go of control, letting go of trying to prevent change, on and on the list goes. So again, that is another huge part of the process, letting go. You cannot let go all at once of everything overnight. I don't know anyone who's done that. Again, it's a process, it's stepping stones, and it's slightly different for everybody. Some people will let go of some things and they will not be able to let go of others, because they're either not conscious of them, they're unconscious, or they've got entrenched, or from their own, let's call it free will again, as much as free will can be a choice when you're unconscious, they decide to stay put in a trajectory that is familiar. So again, as we go through up these rungs of awareness, we start to then, we get to stages where we start to question the labels of things, the labels of us, the labels of everything around us, and what that really means, and what it means to us, and how we identify to that, and how, or with that, how we attach to that, what effects that has on us, and what effect we have on it. I'm going to use a simple example here. That's why I hesitated for a minute, because this flashed into my mind to say, and with imagery, that's why I was smiling. So many of you may have seen the film Castaway. It's a very old film. Well, I say very old. It's an old film with Tom Hanks that is on a flight that crashes, and he ends up as a castaway, you know, on this island for years. And it's his process of survival, really, and transformation, how he survives and transforms through that really difficult time. And during that time, he becomes emotionally attached to a football, which he calls Wilson. And he paints with blood a face on Wilson, the football, just so that he has something to interact with, because, of course, there's no human to interact with and no animal to interact with. So he's interacting with the ball, Wilson. So really, he's, you could say in a way, he's attaching a lot of concepts, and the concept of family and friendship and love and companionship onto a ball, Wilson. Now, I'm using this as an example because it's a powerful example. I actually personally absolutely love that film. And when he tries to escape from the island, later on, and I hope this isn't a spoiler alert, this is an old film. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. I'm sorry, this is a spoiler alert, so you might need to fast forward this bit if you haven't seen the film. When he escapes from the island, he takes Wilson with him, because to him, leaving Wilson there, Wilson no longer is a football. Wilson is has an identity. And in a storm, rough weather and that, Wilson gets dislodged. And sadly, when Tom Hanks is asleep, Wilson falls off into the water. Now, by this point, we, the viewer of this movie, have also identified with Wilson. And so we are like, no, Wilson, wake up, Wilson's in the water, Wilson's going to drown. And we get very distressed as well. So Tom Hanks wakes up, almost drowns in a way. He risks his life trying to get Wilson back onto the raft, and he can't do it. And Wilson bobs off into the sea, never to be seen again. And Tom Hanks is devastated, crying and sobbing. I mean, us, the viewer, I was crying. Every time I see that film, I cry at that bit, because we have identified with Wilson just as much as Tom Hanks has as well. This is a simple way of describing how we invest all our emotions and our consciousness and our perceptions easily into someone else or something else or something, another concept, even an abstract concept, an inanimate thing, and we can invest it all into something living or non-living. And it is very powerful, and that's why I'm using the example of this Tom Hanks film and Wilson the ball. It's the same kind of thing that I'm talking about here. What we're investing our emotions in and our life force in and our energy in. And it is, it probably sounds like, oh God, this sounds like hard work. Well, to uncover who you are at your very heart, and to uncover all of what is part and parcel of your higher self or your oversoul, you as a spark of energy, you as a source, you as spirit, you as soul incarnate, is a process on a very human level of questioning, or a process of inquiry. And these are the kind of questions and concepts that you start to ask yourself. Okay, what am I devoting my time and attention to? How invested am I in a certain idea of who I am, or a certain idea of what I do, or other people's idea of what I am, or other people's idea of what I do, or of your lifestyle, or of your relationship, all of these things, what you've identified yourself as, and how important, shall we say, that concept is to you, that label is to you. Are you basing your whole life on it? Have you run your whole life by it? Did it serve you well? Do you want to do that anymore? Is it holding you back? Is it blocking your energy? All these kind of things. So if we go deeper still, and it's unusual for me to do it this way around, I usually come from the top down, spirit down or source down into this, but I'm coming this way up. So then you'll hit a point where you, as you go through your processes of awakening, where you become more and more conscious, which means you're making decisions perhaps for the first time in your life from a conscious state, meaning that you've probably thought all your life that your decisions were from a conscious state, and in fact 99% of them were not. Because what you perceive your conscious state to be is a pre-programmed state of unconscious. We know this from science, psychology, psychotherapy, hypnotherapy. I'm, qualified in that, 17-year background in that side of things. We know that most of the conventional people's lives are in a pre-programmed state of awareness, what we call subconscious or unconscious. So as you become fully conscious, you realize, perhaps for the first time, that many decisions that you've made have been influenced by the labeling or by the overall structure or have been influenced by you being in an unconscious state. So for the first time, you start making decisions consciously. Which can be very interesting when you're making decisions consciously. And again, it's almost like letting go of layer upon layer until you realize you actually do have these choices. And I could link back to another video I did about 6 months ago called Is Free Will a Choice? And the conclusion I came to on that video is free will is a choice as much as you are conscious. Because how can you have free will if you're unconscious? It's not really free will, is it? It's the same kind of thing that I'm saying here. You realize you have choices from a conscious state that you can make about the way you live your life, what you're doing, how you're spending your life, and your perception of the world. So as you get to all these points, you become far more than aware and far less attached to the label of all these things and the concepts of all these things, and you come into a state of awareness of, again, we could call it sovereignty, we could call it mastery, these are words, we could call it enlightenment, we could call it awakening, we could call it ascension, we could call it fully consciousness. I mean, these are all, again, I use that expression a lot, but horses out of the same stable, because they're all interconnected and all interrelated. You come to a point there where, again, another way of explaining it is a neutral field of energy, a neutral state of consciousness, 0-point field of energy. At that point, you're able to much more easily identify and let go of what has been running you, rather than it being a collaborative thing. You are much more able to identify where you've been looped in with control energies around you. You're much more able to be, again, I'm going to use the word self-actualized, self-realized, self-aware, not self-obsessed. Self-actualized, self-realized, and self-aware is not self-obsessed. It means an understanding beyond all the conceptual stuff. It's not conceptual, it's actual. So you become aware in a way of the purity of you as energy, as life force, as consciousness, as an expression, minus all the gunk on it that we get through a lifetime. It's where we start as that and then come down through these filters and get kind of lost and entangled along the way. It's kind of going back to the future. I mean, I brought a video out called Going Back to the Future about 2 years ago, in a way explaining my understanding of this concept then. you'll notice on my channel, and there are some videos I'm going to be revisiting, especially a few of the early really popular ones that have got the most views on this channel. I'm going to be revisiting them very shortly from the state of awareness and consciousness I now have, which of course is vastly different to the state of awareness and consciousness I had 3 years ago, because I've kept moving forward and expanding. So I'm going to interlink the two and bridge between two states of consciousness in the early videos and the state I am now, to bring about, hopefully, a neutral 0 point field of consciousness between the two videos. I just got covered in goosebumps when I said that. So that's a definite. We're going to be doing that. I'm going to be doing that. Probably sooner rather than later. So we hit in our awareness, in the micro and the macro, a 0 point field of consciousness. We have awareness of other things. As other things come in at us that are not of neutral 0 point field of consciousness, we are able to transform them, translate them, not engage with them or process them through us like a filtration unit and out the other side again. And then we hit another point, which is really what this video is all about. I mean, I'm building up to it, which is why I guess I'm doing it this way round. It's unusual for me to go this way round. Where we then are being invited, in a way, by our higher self, I guess our oversoul, by us as a human being, to go even, I'm going to call it higher. I don't mean in a hierarchy kind of way, but I mean higher in our awareness. When we are in that neutral state, to looking at then, okay, what are we then? Or what am I? Or what are we? When we are in a neutral state of consciousness minus all that stuff, because this is the bit that scares people. Before they get to this bit, it scares them. Like, what is left then? What is left if I've based my whole life on a concept or belief or perception? What is then left? Will there be nothing left? Will I cease to exist? Absolutely not. What you will do is well, it's the death rebirth thing. It's not a literal death. Your perception of things, in a way, transforms. It ceases to exist in its way, the way of explaining it, it ceases to exist the way that you look at it or feel about it, because it's transformed, alchemized in a way. So the question here is, what are you when all of this, you're in that neutral state of consciousness? What are you? Now, what I'm going to say before I launch into this, very slowly and carefully, the temptation at that point is to fill your 0 point field state of consciousness with something. And that is habitual, and that is very much governed by the more animalistic, egocentric part of us, where we're so used to filling any kind of space, any kind of, I could call it a void, I guess, but any kind of space, any kind of neutral ground there. We're so used to background noise and background programming and all this stuff going on, that there's a habitual response to immediately fill that with something. The most common thing people fill it with is another powerful belief system, and perhaps the most powerful belief system of all, which would be something along a religious concept, or come to the point of God. Now, again, it's interesting to see this. And again, the questions you could ask yourself is, if you're one of those people, what is that about? Is that coming from, again, you've looped into a belief system, or is that coming from a knowing? Or is that coming from a belief? Is that coming from knowledge, or is that coming from wisdom? Again, it's looking at where that's coming from, and are you identifying again with another label or another concept to fill that, or is it very different for you? Now, only you will kind of, I was going to say only you will know that, but sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you're the last one to know. It's like when we're going through these stages of consciousness, we can't really see them when we're in them. It's when you go up a level that you can see that. I mean, I could ask them very deep questions here. Is again, really deep questions. Is like if you're at that stage where you're thinking, well, what is there then? Is it source? Is it God? You know, what is that state that you are left in or left with? And these are very, very deep questions that are almost like, I could say in a way, you process this personally to you, because on the stepping stones up to this and the very many layers, there are layers of enlightenment and layers of bliss, and the nearest, let's say the nearest human way we have of describing that is the nearest thing we can come to in our words and our emotions to explain it would be pure love, would be pure bliss, would be pure joy. But I'm talking about going back even before that. So that's one part of it. And it's important to say that we're on a bus here, but we can choose which stops to get off at. I mean, this is really important to say. You might stop to get off at a different stop. You might get off at a different stop. You might get off at a different kind of consciousness or a different rate of awareness. There's no... it doesn't mean everyone's going to the same destination on the bus in embodiment in this lifetime. You do have that element of free will when you're conscious where to get off at. But I'm going to go back even before bliss and before pure joy and before pure love, and take it back even further, which is a place where many people don't like to go because they will take it back as far as love, bliss and joy because it feels amazing. But they don't even go back before that because, you know, this is the questions I'm asking here. What is back before that? Pure consciousness, pure energy, pure spark, pure life force. Before it has translated, if you like, taken on form, we've come into form where it has been translated by, let's say, humanity or humankind into ways to live our life by, or translate our life by, or books to live our life by. Another level of it being bliss, joy, that purity, and so it comes down, so it comes down, so it comes down. So why I'm bringing this out is this is a point that people are hitting, and I've seen that in a few people around me, and I've also seen how scary it can be for them to be awakening in a way that is making them question many things, and many things on a multidimensional level, not just linear in their life now. I mean, becoming aware of all these things. And again, the way I would explain it, it's like we are on a bus, and there is that free will involved. As much as someone can have free will when they're unconscious, they can have free will when they're within a degree when they're unconscious. Really, it's not free will, to be honest. But they can have free will when they're conscious. They can decide where they want to stop at. So someone, say, that was in the light worker industry, they could go so many stops on the bus, then they could get off and decide, I'm going to focus entirely on twin flames. And that's where I'm going to spend my consciousness, and I'm going to go around there. Somebody else could go on a bus stop and they say, I'm going to focus entirely on angels. I'm going to go into that vibration and to the archetypal stuff. I'm going to focus on there. Another one will say, I'm going to focus so much on mediumship, connecting with people that have passed over and giving evidence of life beyond death to other people to help them. Another person could say, okay, I'm going to focus entirely on ascension and getting people to awaken in a different way or come into their heart. There are no hard and fast rules here. There is free will on which stops you get off to the degree of which you are aware. So some people will stay in one trajectory for many years of their life or for the rest of their life because they like that. Others will say, I'm not staying on that bus at all anymore because it's not serving me, or I'm not serving it. I don't like it. I don't like the way it's going. I'm going to get completely off the bus and I'm going to go do something completely off left field because that makes me feel happy and that makes me feel well and that makes me feel alive. Again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's free will, free choice. Other people will go still further. They will be in this process of questioning, be in this process of inquiry where they are, would I say, seeking answers. It's interesting to say. Now, for me, these concepts, I don't need to know the answer to this stuff. And I mean, I can say that with hand on heart. I don't need to know the answer to this stuff. Why don't I need to know the answer to this stuff? Because really, I feel in my heart all of the answers are already there anyway, and I don't really have to be having an analytical explanation for it. Of course, my mind is very interested in psychology. I'm very interested in consciousness, and I really love let's say decoding that and deciphering that. But do I need it? I absolutely don't need it, but I find it really interesting. So if you're one of those people that find it interesting, what you find is you just go a little bit more and just see, okay, what is behind this? And it is interesting. Again, if you're one of these people that are looking at it this way, you could look at what that brings up for you. Does that bring up an immense feeling of happiness and love and joy, or does that bring up a lot of fear for you? I think you get to a stage in your awareness where when you go back behind the bliss and behind the love and behind the peace, I'm going to say behind, really what I'm saying is before that, I feel that the love, peace and joy, let's say, up to now, it's been the highest level of filter that we could experience what we're trying to describe in human form. But if you go back, if you go higher than that, before that, what we're really taking back to is a pure state of, well, it's purity, pure consciousness. Before we come into a form that we can describe, embody, learn through, all of those things. It's taken us back to there, and it's just it's really interesting to look at that. Some people, I'm going to just leave this open-ended because I'm not going to attribute any belief system or concept of mine onto this, because that's, in a way, that's your work and that's your job to identify that within yourself. The amazing thing, and I find it amazing saying, is I don't really have a belief or concept on this. What I feel is, well, I'm going to have to put it as near as I can. I feel it as a state of absolute neutrality, of pure consciousness there. Some people will call that different names and identify different things with that. Some of them will call that different names because that's what their way of describing it is to them. Other people will call it a particular thing because they feel that they've hit that, but in fact they're entangled in another belief system. It's just different for everyone. Again, there's no judgment here. What I'm doing is I'm just finding it really interesting peeling back these layers to what is before us in our very human state of awareness. I think in a way we don't have to do this, but in a way it would be crazy not to peel it right back to there, just so that we have an understanding in a way of what consciousness is. I don't want you to get the idea that to become fully conscious you're just like a blob. You're just like an inanimate blob that doesn't have any thoughts, feelings, and you're just so neutral that you don't do anything, because that defeats the whole purpose of living and life force and human experience. It's not like that. You just have an awareness that you are the interplay of life force, and you are the interplay of love, and you are the interplay of pure consciousness, that at your very heart, I guess, you are in a neutralized pure state, but that to have a human experience in this world, because that's what we're here for, it does come through our personalities, it does come through our bodies, it does come through our emotions, it does come through our personal perceptual filter. That's what makes life interesting. How boring would it be if we were just bland, all fully conscious and bland, with zero personalities, zero input, zero expression, and we just sit cross-legged and don't have even the need to talk, really, because we're doing it all in consciousness. It sounds pretty boring to me. I don't feel that that's what we signed up for. We signed up to be the embodiment of our highest expression of awareness and consciousness in human form, meaning to experience it as a human being through the perceptual filters that we have. I mean, that's all about balancing, and that's all about anchoring. That's all about living it, living those relationships, living those lives, living a life. Otherwise, you could get to a point where, if you're not careful, in a way, you're not living. So what do I mean that you're not living if you're alive? If you're spending all your time on the concept of it all and not actually living it, being the embodiment, the actualization of it, living it in your everyday life, when you're going to the store, when you're picking the kids up from school, when you're in your marriages, when you're in your relationships, when you're with your lover, when you are in your leisure time, when you're working, if you're not living it 24/7, and it's just a concept you link into or conceptualize all the time instead of actualize, instead of being it, in a way you're in danger of your life passing you by, because you've gone off into la la land there, and you're not actually becoming the micro and the macro. You're not embodying it. Lots of people I know, and I've seen this many times through work, they struggle with that part of it. I mean, I think everybody does, we all do. And they conceptualize it, and they think that by linking into certain things or going to see certain people, I mean, this links in with the guru complex a little bit, that they put people up on a pedestal, and they think that if they keep going and seeing that or attending that or being there, that will link them into it. But then they come away from it and they drop a bit again, because they're, in a way, I could say they're not doing this bit of it. There's no criticism, but they're not doing this bit of it. They're holding on to a label again, really, a concept, a belief system, a label of who they are and who they believe the person is that they're going to for the teaching or learning teaching, learning, wisdom is invaluable in the lives that we lead. We all, well, there's wisdom handed down from the elders and from people that are at different stages of consciousness. Well, I think everybody needs that, that mirroring, that projection, that reflection. That's how we learn, both personally and professionally. But you can see where we get entangled again, that word, along the way, and we can kind of slightly deviate off along the way. So I hope you found this interesting and not too challenging, really. I think it has to be said because it's all part of consciousness, and it's something I'm seeing in people that I work with. It's definitely something I'm seeing out in the media. It's definitely something I'm seeing on YouTube. It's definitely a stage I've got to myself where I'm able to, let's say, I'm flexing my muscles energetically to feel out behind certain elements of it, and I'm at a point here where I do not find that threatening at all. In fact, I find it interesting. I don't find it threatening. I'm not hanging on to it or jumping on a bandwagon. I just find it interesting. I am going to bring out some more videos, okay, in a way more down to earth than this. I really feel like, I mean, I could be on here night and day. Sometimes it goes like that with me. I think there'll be 2 or 3 within the next week that will be revisiting, in a way, my most popular videos on this channel, but from the state of consciousness I'm at now, which will hopefully add another dimension to it and bridge where I'm at now in consciousness to where I was there and create a 0-point field of energy. Every time I say that, I get covered in goosebumps, so I really feel that's why I'm being driven to do that, and that's what it's about. On that note, I hope it gave you something to think about. I hope you didn't find it too challenging. I hope you found it interesting. I will love you and leave you. Thank you as always for watching the channel, subscribing, supporting me in any way that you have done, and continue to do so. And until we meet again, which will probably be sooner rather than later. Thank you guys. Bye. Take care. Bye-bye.